Let's just dive right in. We're going on an incredible mental journey today through classical Mahayana Buddhist philosophy. This explainer takes us deep into an ancient text that unpacks the immense, reality-bending power of our intentions. It's all about this brilliant paradox, the idea that the world as we know it is completely empty, yet our supreme duty is to somehow save it. Sounds impossible, right? But as you'll see, this is the literal foundation of the Bodhisattva path.
To set the stage here, there's this brilliant little story from the text that I just love, mostly because it takes these massively high-level concepts and grounds them in a totally relatable, everyday human interaction. It asks a really simple question: who is spiritually greater? An arhat, a fully realized, enlightened master with supernatural powers, or a young novice monk who just carries his bags? Your gut probably says the master, right? Well, let's see what actually happens on the road.
So this story brilliantly shows us the supreme power of an initial vow. Picture this. The arhat and his young novice are walking down a path. The novice is lagging way behind, lugging all the heavy bags. All of a sudden, a thought pops into the novice's head. He thinks, you know what, I want to become a Buddha so I can save all living beings. The master, who can read minds, literally stops in his tracks, takes the heavy bags, steps aside, and insists the young boy walk in front of him. But then, the novice gets a little discouraged. He thinks to himself, man, becoming a Buddha is just too hard. It takes way too long. I'm just going to focus on my own liberation. Instantly, the master shoves the heavy bags right back into the boy's arms and tells him to get to the back of the line. The master tells him, look, the exact second you formed the intention to save everyone, you became my teacher. But the moment you dropped that vow for your own comfort, you went right back to being just a novice. So a single, sweeping intention to help others literally elevates this kid above his fully realized master. Incredible, right?
Okay, so moving right along, let's talk about how we actually accelerate this intention.
The big question here is, once you actually have that grand intention to save everyone, how do you scale it up? How do you generate the kind of immeasurable merit you'd need for ultimate enlightenment? Well, in this really profound exchange, the Buddha is talking to Shakra, who's the king of the gods. Shakra wants to know exactly how much merit you get from simply being happy for someone else's good deeds. And the Buddha sets up this mind-blowing contrast. He tells Shakra, hey, theoretically, you could take a giant scale and weigh the 4 continents. You could literally figure out the exact physical weight of the entire universe. But the merit of simply rejoicing, just being genuinely happy about the good deeds of a bodhisattva, that is completely unweighable. It breaks the scales.
To really drive this point home, the Buddha uses this absolutely mind-bending metaphor. He tells Shakra to imagine taking a single strand of human hair. Got it? Now, split that one hair into 100 microscopic pieces. If you took just one of those tiny hundredth of a hair splitters and used it to scoop up water drop by single drop, you could eventually count every single drop of water in the entire ocean. I mean, it would take an absolute eternity, but technically, it's measurable. However, the positive energy generated by purely rejoicing in someone else's intention to save others, that can't be measured at all. It is literally infinite.
Now let's wade a little bit into the deep end here and talk about the illusion of the mind.
So, we've established that the intention to save beings is incredibly powerful. But what exactly is the nature of the mind that's making that intention in the first place? This is where a disciple named Subhuti hits the Buddha with a massive philosophical curveball. He basically says, look, you've taught us that the mind is empty, that everything we perceive is, at its core, an illusion. Well, if the mind itself is an illusion, how on earth can it achieve something as real and permanent as ultimate enlightenment? I mean, how can a phantom cross a finish line? It is such a fantastic question, and it cuts right to the absolute heart of Mahayana philosophy.
And the Buddha's answer? It is a total paradigm shift. He takes the question and completely flips it on its head. He explains that it is exactly because everything is absolutely empty that enlightenment is even possible in the first place. Think about it like this. If reality were solid, fixed, and unchanging, we'd be trapped forever. Your suffering would be a permanent, unchangeable state, no way out. It's precisely because the mind and reality lack this fixed, permanent essence, because they are empty, that transformation, growth, and ultimate liberation can actually happen. So emptiness isn't some dark, depressing void, it is literally the ultimate potential for change.
This brings us to a really crucial concept for understanding how this all works in practice: the nature of non-discrimination.
To really wrap our heads around this emptiness and make it actionable, we have to understand what the text calls complete non-discrimination. This is basically how an enlightened mind interacts with the world. And the text gives us these 4 incredible metaphors for things that perform their functions perfectly without getting all emotionally tangled up in judgments.
First, think of empty space. It holds absolutely everything, right? But it grasps at nothing. Or think of a mirror's reflection. A mirror will reflect a beautiful blooming flower or a pile of garbage with the exact same clarity. It doesn't love the flower and hate the trash. It just functions. Or picture a carpenter's wooden puppet. It moves and acts when the strings are pulled, completely devoid of any bias about what's near, far, loved, or hated. The text is urging us to act in the world, to help people, to strive, to live our lives with the completely frictionless, non-discriminating clarity of that mirror.
But of course, this leads to a massive collision of two very different realities.
Because, let's be real here for a second. Another top disciple, Shariputra, steps in and basically challenges how we experience the world right now. He's like, okay, if ultimate reality is just emptiness, if everything is functioning perfectly like a mirror or a puppet with zero discrimination, then why is the world such a mess? Where do the realms of hell, the animal kingdom, humans, and gods even come from? Why is there so much suffering and joy if the whole thing is just an empty illusion? It's a completely fair point.
And Subhuti beautifully resolves this paradox by mapping out two intersecting layers of existence. On the one hand, you have ultimate reality. Down at this level, you have pure emptiness, non-discrimination, and ultimately a complete absence of individual beings. But, on the other hand, you have conventional reality, and that's a completely different experience. Subhuti explains that sentient beings, us, we have these inverted, diluted minds. We constantly make the mistake of believing things are solid and permanent. And because of that delusion, we crave things, we hate things, and we take action based on those impulses, which generates karma. That karma is the engine that spins up our conventional world, projecting the 6 realms of rebirth. So all that suffering and joy, it is entirely real to the deluded mind experiencing it, even while the ultimate reality beneath the whole shebang remains perfectly empty and completely untouched.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the climax of this whole philosophy, saving the formless void.
This is where everything we've been talking about in this explainer really comes together. We've seen that the world is an illusion created by our own karma, basically projected onto an empty canvas. So, what does an enlightened being actually do with that information? Well, Subhuti drops a massive truth bomb on the gathered gods. He tells them that simply realizing this emptiness, that's not actually the hardest part. I mean, sure, seeing that the world is an illusion is a massive achievement, but it's not the ultimate goal. The true difficulty, the absolute peak of spiritual heroism, lies in the vow of the Bodhisattva. Think about it. It's relatively easy to just check out and rest in the total peace of emptiness. It is infinitely harder to choose to stay in the mess.
This right here is arguably the most profound concept of the entire text. It says, desiring to save sentient beings is like desiring to save empty space. Let that sink in for a second. The Bodhisattva commits to saving infinite suffering beings, feeling this massive, overwhelming compassion for the pain they're experiencing in their conventional reality. But at the exact same time, the Bodhisattva perfectly knows that in ultimate reality, those beings are as empty, formless, and unreal as space itself.
They are basically taking a solemn vow to fight an endless, exhausting battle to save empty space. They dive headfirst back into the illusion of the world to rescue the illusions of people suffering from their own illusions. And the kicker? They do it completely devoid of any attachment to the outcome. They act with that pure, non-discriminating clarity of the mirror we talked about earlier. It is pure action, without ego. It's supreme compassion armed with supreme wisdom.
So I'm going to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on today. What if literally nothing is permanent? Not your biggest problems, not your deepest flaws, nothing. If reality is truly that empty and that flexible, how differently would you live your life right now? What if you could act with just infinite, boundless compassion for everyone around you while simultaneously holding the absolute truth that none of this is fixed? I guess the real question is, are you ready to fight for an empty sky? Thanks so much for exploring this with me.